I am Elena Voss, 30 years old, a lawyer devoted to women's rights, living in a modest apartment in the heart of Paris. I have spent my life fighting for those whose voices were silenced, advocating tirelessly for justice and autonomy. Yet, I never imagined that the greatest battle would come from within my own family. My mother, Margot 58, a seasoned nurse at the Lumière de Vie reproductive clinic, is consumed by an obsession with preserving the family's reproductive legacy. Every word, every glance from her carries the weight of expectation, a silent demand that shapes the lives around her. Then there's my sister, Camille, 35, a free-spirited artist whose independence seems enviable at first glance. But under our mother's shadow, Camille has been drawn into a world I can barely comprehend. Serving as a surrogate countless times, her body pushed to its limits, a fragile vessel for our mother's vision. The more I watch, the clearer it becomes that this is not merely a story of familial pressure or twisted devotion. Beneath the surface lies a darker, more insidious truth, tied to the clinic where Margot works, and a hidden network that coerces women into reproductive servitude. It was a secret I stumbled upon by accident, and it threatens not only my family's bonds but the very principles I have spent decades defending. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Part 1: Seeds of Obsession. Ever since I was a child, my mother had implanted into Camille and me the belief that a woman's value was measured by her ability to bear children. She forced us to wear contraptions that simulated pregnancy, 10-kilogram sandbags strapped to our bellies, teaching us to breathe in a way she deemed proper, and making us watch childbirth videos that left my stomach churning. When I complained of back pain, her gaze would harden and she would say flatly, "Real women don't complain." Camille, on the other hand, embraced this ideology as if it were a sacred mission. She even named the fake belly she wore, whispering to it as though it were alive, confiding her dreams and fears in that inanimate weight. By the time she turned 18, Mother organized an extravagant celebration, not for her graduation but to mark her first surrogacy contract. I was 15, huddled in a corner, my stomach twisted with discomfort, watching what felt like an auction rather than a family gathering. Camille became Mother's hero, carrying 3 pregnancies before 25, each time paraded across Paris as a symbol of ultimate sacrifice and devotion. But I saw the cost. Camille's body was breaking down, hair fell in clumps, her hips ached so severely she needed a cane, and her eyes often held a distant, haunted look. When I tried to speak with her, she would grip my hand tightly, tears brimming in her eyes, whispering, "Elena, this is why I exist. Why don't you understand?" Her words were both a plea and a shield. I chose a different path. I dedicated myself to law, specializing in reproductive rights and bodily autonomy. I worked with NGOs across Paris, helping women escape the subtle and overt pressures of families who sought to control their reproductive choices. My mother, however, never acknowledged this work. "A perfect womb wasted," she would say, her tone dripping with contempt, as if my choices were a personal affront to her legacy. The unease began to grow when I noticed the frequency of her communications with doctors at Lumière de Vie, the clinic where she worked. Stories of voluntary girls donating eggs or agreeing to surrogacy contracts multiplied, often whispered in hushed tones when she thought I wasn't listening. Something felt off, yet I lacked proof until one night changed everything. While rummaging through old papers in her study, I discovered a hidden notebook, its leather worn and edges frayed. Inside were names, young women, detailed medical records, and notes scrawled in a meticulous hand. Persuaded, needs additional pressure, compliant. My breath caught when I reached the final pages. My name appeared at the very end, marked with a chilling annotation, uncooperative, needs stronger measures. My heart hammered in my chest, a cold realization creeping over me. This was no longer just about family pressure. This was an organized, systematic effort, one with rules, participants, and targets. My mother was not merely a controlling parent. She was a cog in a larger, darker machine, one that treated women as instruments, not human beings. I remembered Camille's vacant expressions, her whispered reassurances, the almost ritualistic pride with which mothers celebrated each pregnancy. It all aligned now, like a puzzle revealing its grotesque image. Every dinner, every conversation, every carefully orchestrated birthday celebration held a purpose beyond the family, a facade for recruitment and manipulation. The obsessive attention to detail, the selective praise, the punishments disguised as discipline, the casual discussions of compliance and coercion, they were pieces of a system I had unknowingly been adjacent to my entire life. Fear gnawed at me, yet I could not turn away. The sense of injustice, the law ingrained in me since childhood, surged forth. I knew I had to understand the full scope of this network, to map it, to expose it. But the stakes were terrifyingly high. If my mother discovered my curiosity, or if she suspected I had uncovered even a fragment of her ledger, the consequences would be severe, not just for me, but for the countless girls listed in that book. I spent that night unable to sleep, the notebook clutched to my chest, my mind racing through every encounter, every seemingly benign instruction from mother that had now revealed itself as conditioning. The weight of what I had uncovered pressed down on me like a physical force. My apartment in Paris, once a sanctuary from family pressures, now felt small, fragile, and inadequate in protecting me from the storm I had just glimpsed. Yet amidst the fear, determination flickered. My life had always been dedicated to protecting women from oppression, from being silenced or exploited. And here in my own family, the lines between love, duty, and coercion blurred to the point of violence. I realized that understanding this network and exposing it would not only honor my own principles, but also save my sister, and countless others, from a fate I could no longer ignore. As dawn crept over the Parisian skyline, the notebook lay open on my desk, names and annotations sprawled like a map of cruelty and control. I made a silent vow. I would follow this trail, no matter where it led, no matter the personal cost. My mother had planted the seeds of obsession in my childhood, but now it was time for me to take those seeds, to unearth the hidden rot and confront the darkness within my own bloodline. The game had begun, and I was determined to be the one to write its ending. Part 2: Traps in the Shadows. At 28, I thought I had escaped my mother. I had built a stable career, carved out a life that was wholly my own, and wrapped myself in the independence I had fought so hard to achieve. I worked long hours at my small but respected firm near the Place de la République, advocating for women who felt cornered by family or institutions. My apartment, perched on the top floor of an old building with wrought iron balconies, overlooked the city like a silent witness to my victories and my quiet breakdowns. There was even someone who seemed to understand me, Julian, 32, an investigative journalist whose tenacity for the truth mirrored my own. With him, my life felt balanced. Quiet dinners after late nights of work, whispered plans for future travel, a sense that perhaps I could finally breathe. But my mother never let go. She had a way of slipping into my life, uninvited but always calculated, like smoke creeping under a closed door. One evening, she called, her voice warm, almost gentle, an invitation to a family dinner at a luxury restaurant in Montmartre. She spoke as though it were an ordinary gathering, a chance to reconnect. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Some part of me still longed for a version of family that didn't feel like a battlefield. The restaurant was dimly lit, the walls lined with velvet curtains and antique mirrors reflecting fragments of flickering candlelight. A string quartet played in the corner, their music soft enough to lull suspicion. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of my mother's perfume hit me, a mix of lavender and something sharper, antiseptic, clinical. Then I saw them. Camille sat beside my mother, her belly swollen with her 5th pregnancy. She wore a flowing dress in pale blue, but her face was drawn, almost translucent, as if the life was slowly being siphoned from her. Her eyes darted toward me with a flicker of something: guilt, warning, despair. Around them, at the long table, sat a group of strangers in tailored suits and sterile smiles. Their posture was too rigid, their gazes too calculating. Took me only seconds to recognize the insignia on one man's lapel: Lumière de Vie. "Ma chère," my mother said, rising to greet me, her tone honeyed but sharp at the edges. "You're not getting any younger." Her words fell like a blade masked as silk. "I've arranged for you to begin fertility treatments." My heart stuttered in my chest. "What?" I said, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. Before I could react further, Camille reached for my hand from behind, her fingers trembling as they wrapped around mine. "Please, Elena," she murmured, her breath hot against my ear. "Just try. Mother found the perfect couple for your first child." Her voice was hollow, as if she were reciting a script she no longer believed in. Then I saw it, my mother's hand slipping into her bag, pulling out a syringe filled with a milky fluid. Hormones. Her eyes glistened with a fervor that chilled me to the bone. It was the look of a zealot, someone who believed she was enacting salvation, not harm. "Stop!" I shouted, twisting away from her, but it was too late. Her grip was iron. The needle plunged into my thigh with a sickening precision. A burning pain spread through my muscles, racing up into my chest, and the room began to blur at the edges. I heard my own voice echo, distant, like it belonged to someone else. Chairs scraped, the quartet's music faltered. Through the haze, I caught fragments of her words, low and urgent into a phone. "Yes, we've begun. She'll be ready for harvesting in 2 weeks." Harvesting. The words snagged in my mind like barbed wire. When I came to, the world was sterile, white, and humming. I was in a hospital bed, the smell of disinfectant clawing at my nostrils. My body felt heavy, foreign, as though it no longer belonged to me. A doctor explained, gently but firmly, that I was suffering from ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, a reaction so severe I had nearly lost my uterus. And then she appeared. My mother, standing at the foot of the bed, her posture immaculate, her eyes devoid of remorse. "I only wanted to save your womb," she declared, her voice calm, rehearsed, as though she were reading a prepared statement. Something inside me snapped. My hand shot to the call button, pressing it hard enough to leave a dent. Moments later, a young nurse entered, a petite woman with auburn hair tucked beneath her cap. Her badge read Claire, RN. She couldn't have been older than 25. Her eyes swept over me, then flicked to my mother. There was recognition there, not of me, but of the pattern. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, coming closer. It was not the polite inquiry of routine care. It was a question loaded with suspicion, with an opening for confession. I told her everything. The years of coercion, the surrogacy contracts, the dinner, the injection, my mother's ledger of girls like me. Claire's face tightened with each revelation, her knuckles whitening as she gripped the edge of my chart. Without a word, she turned to my mother. "You need to leave," she said firmly. "Now." When my mother protested, security arrived, summoned by Claire's quiet but decisive call. That night, alone in my hospital room, I felt the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears pressing against my chest. My phone buzzed on the tray beside me. A text from an unknown number. The message contained only an audio file. My hand shook as I pressed play. It was her voice. My mother's voice. "Elena is difficult," she was saying, her tone clipped, clinical. "But if she won't cooperate, we have other methods. The clinic needs more high-quality eggs." A chill crawled up my spine. Whatever I had suspected before was now undeniable. This was not just about control, about family, about some twisted notion of legacy. This was criminal. I forwarded the recording immediately to Antoine Moreau, a a 40-year-old detective specializing in domestic abuse cases. He had been recommended by Claire, who seemed to know exactly what channels to use. Within minutes, my phone rang. Antoine's voice was deep, deliberate. "I've been investigating Lumière de Vie for months," he said. "Illegal egg trafficking, coercion, even forced surrogacy. We've never been able to get close enough to the inner circle." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone until my knuckles ached. "My mother's involved," I whispered. On the other end, there was a pause, heavy and knowing. "I'm afraid so," he replied. "And now you're in the center of it." The line went silent for a beat, but in that silence something shifted inside me. Fear, yes, but also clarity. For years I had fought for women's autonomy in courtrooms, behind desks, at rallies. Now the fight had come home. It was in my bloodstream, in the hospital force snaking into my arm. I looked out the window at the city, the rooftops glinting under the pale morning light, the world going about its business as if nothing had happened. But for me, nothing would ever be the same. The trap my mother had set had snapped shut, but in doing so, it had revealed itself. And I knew with a cold certainty that this was just the beginning. Part 3, Web of Deceit. Antoine revealed a truth that made my blood run cold. My mother, in her position as a nurse at Lumière de Vie, had been systematically targeting young women, particularly those in vulnerable circumstances, and persuading them to participate in egg donation or surrogacy programs. Everything was meticulously masked by forged legal contracts and fabricated psychological assessments. These women were made to believe they were making autonomous decisions, but in reality, they were ensnared in a meticulously constructed trap. The realization hit me hard. Camille, my sister, was not only complicit by appearance but also a victim. From the moment she was a child, Mother had manipulated her into believing her body's worth was measured solely by its reproductive output. The idea of choice had been stripped from her, replaced by devotion to a twisted vision of family legacy. It didn't stop there. My mother began actively sabotaging my life. She forged my signature on medical consent forms, sent emails from my work account falsely stating I was taking leave due to a psychological crisis, and spread rumors painting me as obsessed with fertility. Julien, who had been my anchor, started to doubt me after Camille showed him doctored messages, edited fragments of our old conversations, twisted to make it appear that I was not only desperate to conceive but mentally unstable. I could see the shift in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, the subtle distance that began to wedge itself between us. It was suffocating. Culmination of her manipulations came when she orchestrated my transfer to the psychiatric wing of the hospital. A familiar figure awaited, Dr. Vivian Leclerc, 50, a close friend of my mother's from the local book club. Her smile was warm, her gaze assessing, but I sensed the pretense. She conducted an evaluation, presenting a report she had already written, labeling me as suffering from a psychological disorder tied to reproductive trauma. She went further, presenting images of dolls I had collected over the years, now inexplicably arranged in my wardrobe. It was meant to be evidence of psychological regression, proof that I was losing my mind. The orchestration was meticulous, cruel, and deliberate. Within the psychiatric unit, I met another young patient, Sophie, 19, whose story echoed my own fears. She had been forced by her family into egg donation after my mother introduced her to Lumière de Vie. Sophie recounted being administered sedatives whenever she resisted, her protests dismissed as mere immaturity. Her mother, she whispered, was deeply entangled with the clinic's operations. Sophie's eyes held the same resigned terror I had seen in Camille years before. I knew her testimony was crucial. I discreetly recorded Sophie's story on my phone, careful to avoid attention from staff or my mother's allies. A nurse, Amelie, 30, noticed my cautious glances and the subtle movements of my fingers as I hid the device. She approached me quietly, her presence a small beacon of hope in the sterile, oppressive ward. Without drawing attention, she took the phone and nodded toward the corner, signaling that the recording had been safely moved to a secure device. This recording became a pivotal piece of evidence, a fragment of the network's dark design. It wasn't just about my mother anymore. It was about the system she had been a part of, a web of coercion and manipulation spanning families, clinics, and influential figures who cloaked exploitation in legality. Listening to Sophie recount her ordeal, I felt a mixture of rage, sorrow, and determination. Her voice, trembling yet defiant, reinforced the urgency of exposing this network. Days blurred together in the psychiatric ward. I maintained a careful facade, interacting just enough with staff to avoid suspicion, observing routines, memorizing key moments when Amelie could assist me. Each interaction with Sophie and other patients, small conversations, stolen glances, whispered reassurances, was a reminder that I wasn't alone in facing these horrors. The cruelty of my mother's orchestration, the meticulous construction of false narratives, and the exploitation of vulnerable women demanded a strategy, patience, and allies. Every night, I reviewed the evidence I had gathered, mapping connections in my mind: names, dates, appointments, relationships, all threads in a tapestry of abuse that stretched far beyond my family. Antoine had instructed me to document everything meticulously to ensure that when the time came, we could dismantle the network from the inside out. The recording of Sophie, along with the notebook I had found months earlier, were cornerstones of our strategy. Amid the fear and the oppression, I felt a flicker of resolve. I would not let my mother's obsession dictate the fates of more young women. I would expose the lies, the manipulations, and the silent violence hidden beneath the guise of legality and family loyalty. The ward's cold walls could not contain my determination. Each secret shared, each whispered account became fuel for the fight ahead. And in that shadowed place, amidst orchestrated chaos and clinical deception, I found a singular truth. The power of the network relied on fear and secrecy, but once those were broken, once the stories were told, the illusion of control could crumble. Sophie's voice, my own memories, and the evidence collected would become the instruments of justice. I would navigate the labyrinth of deceit, unravel the threads of manipulation, and bring the perpetrators, starting with my own mother, to account. Part 4: The Legal Battle. I knew I couldn't confront my mother through rebellion. Any visible defiance would only be framed as madness. The system was stacked against me in ways I had only begun to understand. So I decided on a different strategy: feigned compliance. In therapy sessions, I wept convincingly over the pain of childlessness, wore the maternity garments my mother brought, and asked questions about egg donation procedures with a rehearsed curiosity. Dr. Vivian Leclerc and my mother believed I had succumbed, convinced that their control over me was absolute. Behind closed doors, I carefully orchestrated a different plan. I contacted a trusted colleague, Isabelle Moreau, a 35-year-old lawyer with experience in family and human rights law, through a secure, anonymous email. I sent her the recordings of my mother's voice, Sophie's testimony, and the documents proving my forged signatures. Each piece of evidence was meticulously catalogued, ready to be unleashed at the right moment. A protective hearing took place in a courtroom in Paris, the chamber smelling faintly of polished wood and solemnity. Mother appeared composed, flanked by her lawyer, Philippe Durand, a suave man of 45 whose confidence seemed cultivated to intimidate. They presented Dr. Vivian's report and a stack of falsified documents portraying me as psychologically unstable, a woman incapable of making rational decisions regarding my own body. Then Isabelle began her rebuttal. Calm and precise, she introduced the evidence I had provided: Sophie's recorded account, the notebook listing coerced participants at Lumière de Vie, and, most damningly, the hair test results proving that I had been injected with illegal hormones. Courtroom fell silent as she explained the implications, the illegal manipulations, and the pattern of coercion. I took the stand, my hands shaking, my voice barely more than a whisper at first. "My mother does not want a grandchild," I said, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "She wants to control my body to serve an illegal egg trafficking network. This is not about family. It's about exploitation, coercion, and a criminal enterprise hidden behind the guise of care." The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes and a quiet authority, listened intently, taking notes as the evidence unfolded. Contrast between my mother's rehearsed calm and the mountain of proof we presented was stark. After hours of testimony, deliberation, and cross-examination, the ruling came. The judge dismissed my mother's claim for guardianship and issued a restraining order, forbidding her from contacting me. Mother crumpled in the courtroom, tears streaking her carefully made-up face. "I only wanted a happy family," she wailed, her voice trembling with a desperation I no longer felt. She had lost the carefully constructed narrative she had clung to for decades. I turned to Camille, who now sat in a wheelchair, her body worn and fragile after her 6th pregnancy. The lines of exhaustion were etched deep into her face. I asked quietly, "Did you truly choose this life, or did Mother make you believe there was no other choice?" Her eyes, clouded with pain and a complex mixture of love and resentment, met mine. She said nothing, but the weight in her gaze spoke volumes. Courtroom victory was only the beginning. Days later, I received an anonymous letter from a former employee of Lumière de Vie. Inside were documents and detailed accounts revealing that the clinic had been supplying young women like Sophie and me with eggs for the international black market. The letter contained contact information for investigative journalists, corroborating evidence, and a roadmap to unravel the wider network. This information triggered a larger investigation. Authorities raided Lumière de Vie, seizing records, medications, and equipment. Clinic was shut down immediately, and my mother was arrested on charges of human trafficking, coercion, and abuse of vulnerable individuals. The legal net had finally caught the woman who had dominated my life for so long. Working alongside Antoine, I helped piece together the evidence to build a comprehensive case. Every recording, every document, every testimony became a thread in the web exposing the clinic's criminal operations. We coordinated with international agencies to ensure that the network's reach could be dismantled fully and that those responsible were held accountable. In the aftermath, I knew the survivors needed more than justice in court. I collaborated with Isabel and Antoine to establish a support organization for women exploited by fertility clinics, providing legal aid, counseling, and safe spaces for healing. The organization became a sanctuary, a way to transform the horror of our experiences into a force for protection and empowerment. Looking back, the path to freedom had been paved with deception, pain, and courage. By playing the role my mother expected, I had survived her machinations. By gathering the truth and fighting for justice, I had reclaimed my autonomy. And through it all, I had learned that even in the darkest shadows of betrayal, resilience, strategy, and solidarity could illuminate a path toward liberation. For Camille, Sophie, and countless others trapped in silence, the battle was far from over, but for the first time I felt that the fight was ours to win. Part 5: Lights of Hope. A year had passed since the courtroom victory, yet the memories of betrayal and manipulation lingered like shadows in the corners of my mind. I sat in my law office, overlooking the Seine sparkling beneath the Parisian lights, a quiet city alive with motion and possibility. Julien remained by my side, no longer as a lover but as a steadfast friend, someone who had witnessed the truth and chosen to support me unconditionally. Our bond had shifted, matured, and endured. Camille never spoke to me again, yet a small bridge remained. Her daughter, Lily, 8 years old, began calling secretly. "Cô Elena, cháu không muốn giống mẹ," she whispered over telephone. Her words were fragile yet filled with determination, and I promised her I would always be a safe harbor, a voice of reason and protection. Lumière de Vie was permanently shut down, its doors closed forever. My mother had been sentenced to 3 years in prison, a justice long delayed but finally delivered. I continued my work, now with a newly founded NGO dedicated to helping women coerced into reproductive exploitation regain autonomy over their bodies and lives. Each day I thought of Camille, Sophie, and Lily, reminders that our fight extended beyond ourselves. They were symbols of resilience, of hope, and of the urgent need to break cycles of abuse. One evening, while tidying my apartment, I discovered an old box belonging to Camille. Inside were letters she had written to me as a child, filled with dreams of becoming an artist, of painting landscapes and imagining worlds that had nothing to do with surrogacy. I sent the letters to her with a message: "You can still be yourself, still follow your own dreams." I didn't know if she would ever read them, but I hoped that one day she would reclaim the life stolen from her innocence. From my journey, I distilled 5 lessons I wish to share. 1. Know your worth. No one has the right to define your value. It belongs solely to you. 2. Strength and strategy. Patience and planning can overcome even the most manipulative forces. 3. Allyship matters. Trust and seek allies who see and support your truth. For voice is power. Sharing your story can dismantle hidden abuses and inspire change. 5. Hope is resilient. Even in darkness, hope can light a path for yourself and others. If my story resonates with you, if it stirs a fire or offers perspective, please like, share, and subscribe. Together, we can amplify the message of autonomy, strength, and the enduring power of women. One story at a time, one voice at a time, we can break cycles of oppression and build a world where every choice belongs to the person it should, ourselves. Thank you for listening.